All right. Buenas and hafade todos hamzu. Inanhu si Maga'låhi bavakwa. Zengwawi host me zutalo para este episode Fanachu. My name is Maga'låhi bavakwa. We have another episode of Fanachu, and this is a very special episode of Fanachu for those of you who are Chamorro scholar nerds out there. Or if you are somebody like me who went through Micronesian studies, if you had the privilege of taking a class with somebody like Vince Diaz, Ann Hattori, or someone like that, where you had to read a book or you had to read passages, chapters from a book called Pacific Passages. Pacific Passages. If you had to read a book like that, it had a batik from Judy Flores on the front and on the back. That was its cover and that was its back. And it was a very, very interesting book. And I can take you back to where I was at when I first encountered it as an undergrad and then a graduate student. And you read it, and it was very fascinating because it was written by somebody who was coming from a European perspective, coming from Sweden, writing their dissertation and doing their fieldwork in Guam. And it was dealing with all these big, fancy kind of global concepts. And so, on the one hand, you might think that this was something in which it would be very disconnected from the community, that it would kind of just, it wouldn't, that, but at the same time, when I was reading it as a student, it was referencing all these people that I was connecting to. It was referencing all of these activists out there in Guam, Nasion Chamoru activists, OPIR activists, political leaders. And so, what was amazing about the book Pacific Passages when I encountered it was that that it was, at the one hand, it was looking at what was happening in Guam in the 1990s in this global sense, talking about how all of these contentious issues of Chamorro identity, decolonization, political status, even just politics, campaign, election politics, that the author was looking at these things in these global trends. But at the same time, it was very clear that the author had spent some time sweating under pala pala canopies, hanging out with a lot of the people that I was hanging out with, that he had maybe gone to Chamorro Nation meetings, just like I had gone to Chamorro Nation meetings, and that he had gone and sat in on meetings of the Chamorro Language Commission, and that he had listened into the debates about Chamorro language and spelling, just like I was encountering for the first time about how do we spell the word Chamorro. And so it was a very, very interesting and fascinating book, which, as I went through grad school, most of my classes read, if not the whole thing, parts of it, and it would lead to a lot of debates and a lot of conversation about it. Because for somebody who was an outsider, they seemed to have a lot of insider knowledge about what Chamorros were thinking about these types of issues. And so I'm very happy to have with me for this episode of Fanachu, Dr. Ronald Stade. Stade, not Stade, Stade. Okay, because I've heard people pronounce it as Stade, but then I always go with what Senor Juan Benavente says. He says Stade. See, Stade. and so and so I'm glad that he is here with me, where he is going to be talking about this book that he wrote, Pacific Passages, which, he did the research in the mid 90s. So it's about 30 years ago. But talking about his time on Guam, which this was a time, just to take us back for a little bit, this was when Nasion Chamoru was doing a lot of their direct action protest work. It was a time when Angel Santos was elected into the Guam legislature. It was also a time when Dr. Stade was on Guam, when the first attempt to change the spelling of Chamorro to ORU was being discussed and debated. And so, a very fascinating time. And so, Sidzus Masi, Senor Parifinatomu, thank you so much for joining for this episode of Fanachu. Um, How are you doing? Hafatat Manuel.
It's massive for having me, and yeah, it's fantastic to be able to go back and talk to you about all these experiences. It's uh, it's something that obviously never left me. I mean, the I don't know how to describe it, but my I remember it as living at this at light speed, the speed of light, very intense. I was out and about every day and every night. I was so immersed in everything Chamorro and everything Guahan that I'm still there mentally. I mean, I can still feel I can feel the intensity and the adrenaline of everything. Also because I was so lucky. I mean, just came at a time that was, as you say, it was very political. I think that's would be an appropriate term. Um, the first time I came to Guam was in 1993, and I had made contact with a local anthropologist, and I was I don't know. I was introduced like the how holy I am, I guess, and was giving like the grand tour of what people are expected to look at, the latte park or something, some things like that. So, but then I also was told that yeah, there is this guy and he's trying to run for office. His name is Angel Santos. But stay away from him, I was being told, because once are associated with him, you lose all credibility. That was the actual advice. Of course, me being me, this had the exact opposite effect. I I ran to Angel Santos, and I was there when they did the vote counting. Um, on that evening. So, and that was my first contact with Angel and my first contact with Nasion Chamoru. And yeah, so this
Oh,
was
wow.
just by coincidence. Yeah,
This, these are this is amazing. And I think even just sort of that fact right there, this is one of the reasons why I think, history is it's so important to understand history. Just because, nowadays when we think about somebody like Angel Santos, most people think of him as being this unesteemed figure because of the stands that he took. But even me, you know, when I was young and in the late 90s, when I first heard about Angel Santos, he had already been elected as senator a few times. He had gone to he was supposed to he would soon go to federal prison for 6 months. But by that time, he was still controversial. People still said those sorts of things. And it's important to remember that. Don't glaze
yeah,
over the fact. Because sometimes when we do that, those who have struggled, those who have sacrificed, we lose that memory, and then history gets kind of flattened. People just imagine things are have always been a certain way, and nothing is different, and we forget that. And so just that is such an important point right there. That idea, yes, there is this guy, Angel Santos, but stay away from him. Stay away
yeah,
from him.
exactly.
Wow.
So I had initially planned to do field work in what just had ended as the East German Republic, the German Democratic Republic. Because my I was born and raised in Germany, so this is those are my origins. Um, But then, of course, I soon found out that the field was so crowded. Everybody was going to write about this, the end of the Cold War, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and so I felt like, oh, okay, I probably won't have anything to contribute. Well, I did actually write my first uh, journal publication is on that topic. But then I thought that so what was the I mean what really interested me about the situation was growing up in post-war Berlin. There was still a lot of rubble. There were still flattened buildings and everything and condemned buildings. It was uh, it was almost like a Gaza situation where things hadn't been rebuilt yet. And of course, my parents had been children in the war, and so growing up with tales of war, really, and how do people get out of it, and what happens after, also in terms of militarization, because obviously Berlin was heavily militarized. And then I remembered, wait a minute, my first cousin, Patricia, my father's sister's daughter. Uh, so my father's sister had emigrated to the U.S. and I had stayed with her and with her husband at one point, and her husband was Chamorro. So I had a family connection to 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 Chamorros, and I checked with him, and he contacted his mother, who was in Guam, and yes, I mean, sure, go to Guam. He thought it's a very nice place, and go there. But for me, of course, it was more about again the militarization, the post-war situation, because the Pacific War also changed a lot for Guam. It had a huge impact. Um, Not only because of the reoccupation, but also because of the military buildup and the fate of the political fate of one, and and so yeah, so my auntie, my Chamorro auntie, she helped us a lot. We arrived. We had rented a little cottage, and the I don't know if this is something that you are able to remember because you're too young, maybe, but there had been an earthquake in 1992,
Oh
a
yes,
big one.
I definitely remember. I was maybe 12 years old.
Yeah, and the Hilton, part of the Hilton had collapsed, and so this it was askew. It was the whole part of the whole wing of the Hilton at the Tumon Bay was askew, and so I checked what would they do with the stuff inside the rooms. Will they just what will happen to them? So I bought one of the rooms, and for $400, even with the mini fridge, and my Chamorro relatives, they helped me move it, and that's how I that's how we furnished our little cottage. So we were living in a Hilton. uh,
Oh,
it
I love
was
this.
even the artwork.
Oh my goodness. Even the art, oh,
Yeah,
the paintings and the or the oh okay.
yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah.
oh Zahu. I love that. I love that. Do you uh do you recall the name of your Chamorro, the family name or the last name or the family name of your Chamorro relatives?
Well, I hesitate to. There's some things with the husband of my cousin that So yeah, that's not
No worries, no worries, no worries. But so where did you stay? Where did you stay in Guam?
in Zigo
Ah,
and in Zigo. Yeah, because for typically Howley reasons, because I had read about the tsunamis and at least 25 meters above and stuff. And so I looked at the topography and I thought, oh, up there in the north, we're safe.
oh
Yeah,
wow. And thank you for filling in because I had always wondered kind of what had brought your intellectual inquiry to Guam, to Guahan, and
yeah.
sort of Chamorro stories. And so it's interesting then because I can kind of you filling in that helps me it I can see some of the ways then that comes out in Pacific Passages in sort of the connections that you make. Okay. Now, all
So,
right, now,
so the
oh,
thing
go ahead. Go ahead.
is, so I just wanted to say that the initial project that I had in my head was, oh, I'm going to study civilian military relations in Guam. That was, the short of it. That what I was going to study. But then, which I think many Haolis have experienced, in particular those who married into Chamorro families, is that you get sucked in and, and it's everything changes and you're like, okay, all those plans out the window and and you become Chamorroized or whatever you want to call it. So that happened to me. I became so much, there was so much more. So the whole military civilian relationship became much more of a tertiary or whatever issue. So, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
No, no, yes. Okay, that makes sense. I can totally see that. Especially one of the things that I really liked is when you described being on Guam and it's everything is so busy and things are happening and that definitely is. That's the way that I feel out in Guam. I'm always confused when people tell me there's nothing happening on Guam. I'm like, well, you don't have enough relatives then, or
Yes, exactly.
you don't have enough obligations then, because if you've got interests,
Exactly.
obligations, or relatives, then siyempre tinanan ni Hautoro Chempo, you'll always be busy. Make it
Exactly.
mo.
You have to choose which rosary to go to.
Mm, oh yes, most definitely. And
Yeah.
now Now, in Pacific Passages, you do mention a few of the people who kind of guided you or who played a big role in helping connect you and helping you understand some of the local landscape, the local cultural kind of political landscape. And so I wanted to give you a chance. Who were some of the kind of the individuals who helped who acted as your cultural informants, your cultural guides, or just, your tsetlugitsala, your siblings on the street who helped you out.
Yeah. Gatung, yes.
Oh,
Uh,
Hungan, Gatsung, Hungan.
uh, so, of course, first and foremost, there's Si Juan Benavente from Dadiro. And I think among anthropologists, the world around, he's a well-known figure because he calls himself the uh, uh, cultural interpreter, and he really is an excellent um, teacher. He made clear from the very beginning that I was his student, he was my teacher, and so whatever he told or said went. I didn't really have a say in anything, and I, I I accepted that because I think that's the right way to. You have to come to some place you want to understand with humility. You cannot just come there and have preconceived notions and whatever. So yes, I was very grateful that he was my teacher, and and he continued to be my teacher for many, many years, even after he visited me in Sweden, by the way. Uh,
Oh, wow, wow.
yeah, yeah. So yes, he's a Gatungu.
He is almost twice my age, and he is mas bravo que Nuguahu. He is fitter and stronger and more adventurous than I am. He's
Oh yeah. Oh
because
yes.
just
Oh
a few
yes.
years ago he was back up Mount Kilimanjaro, and
Exactly.
me, my back hurts going up the stairs here at the house. And so,
Yeah.
oh my goodness. But yes,
Yeah.
Juan Benaventina, I have learned so much from him too. And
Yeah.
so it's wonderful that you connected with him, and that he was he was a part of your research, your time on Guam and
Very much.
within Chamorro
Oh
culture.
yeah. Very much so. I mean, yeah. I mean, we met very often, and also because he obviously was um, uh, close to Anget, to Angel Santos. So usually when I was with Angel, it was also with C1. So with that constellation. But yes, Angel Santos also was obviously of great help. Uh, he he I don't know. There's so many things I could say about him, but um, the one episode that that stuck in my mind, and I was there. We it was my then wife and our newly born daughter. We were together in Guam, and at one point I had her on my arm, and Angel and I were talking, and suddenly he put my daughter's whole foot in his mouth. And she laughed. She laughed, and I laughed our heads off. I mean, that was so funny and such an unexpected move, you know. So anyway, but yeah, so C1, and but then there were also people like Dr. Benedita Camacho Dunca. Um, she had a similar attitude to C1, as she so also was, you know, quite stern with me, but I was grateful because she could, you know, whatever misconceptions I had, she would correct. So very good. And then, of course, our mutual friend Vince Diaz, um, right? Um,
Oh yes.
and we had, I think we found each other because we had these lofty intellectual debates about European what's it called, continental philosophy, and where he said that, yeah, I have no one else to talk to. So yeah, so we went on these, but also I mean, also in very practical terms. So I had to take the Guam driver's license, and he, uh, yeah, I mean, he would, you know, drive me to the examination and everything. So, and from him, I learned the proper way to the proper Chamorro way. Although he's not Chamorro, but he knew the proper Chamorro way to show your appreciation. So, in appreciation of him helping me, one night I snuck up to his house and planted two big watermelons on his porch, without, of course, obviously not giving away who put it there. So, yeah,
Oh,
uh,
oh, I, Sidzus Masi Gofzahu Este Historia. I love these stories. And I mean, Vince Diaz was my Guam history teacher and one of the people who helped me become more critical, as a student. And so, and it's lovely to hear these, these stories. And then Bennett Dunca too was there was a few
yeah,
years where we were where she was towards the end of her career at UOG before she had passed away, and then I was new faculty at the University of Guam, and so our time overlapped, and so I would see her regularly and spend time with her, and she would always tell me how handsome I was, and then she would always pinch me.
That's her. That's
Yeah.
Bennett. Yes, exactly. Yes,
Yeah.
that's how I remember her as well.
Yep.
Yes. Uh, and uh, and then there was also Catherine Sablan Gold. Do you know about her?
Oh, yes. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you are familiar with it, but so I don't know if you've seen it, but so the Ricky Berdalio's autobiography, the first
Yeah.
so was finally
Exactly.
finished and it's been published. The first half
Yes.
was published this year, and so Kathy Sablan Galt is the one who worked on it, and so oh yeah, no, she's
Yeah.
one of
I
these days I'm going to
I
have her on this
she
podcast too.
definitely, because she allowed me to read the drafts. And she showed me the original documents that she used as well. And so, yeah, I learned a lot from her. In particular, of course, as Badazu is concerned, but also Ricky is concerned, but also, I mean, just a wider perspective on culture in Guam. So yeah, I mean, there were all these people who helped me understand what was going on, and I was very, very grateful.
Mm, no, Humgad. It's interesting because you bring up Kathy Sablan Galton. One of the things that really I appreciated was about Pacific Passages is that you did have some good points. There was some good points about understanding sort of the nature of media on Guam at that time. The sort of the and it was, I think it may have been from your conversations with people like Kathy Sablan Galt and others, kind of, and then putting it in because just in general, one of the things that was very, very important for me, about your book was that there is one of the things that I see that happens in colonies is there is just this feeling, and social media always reminds me about this up until today. There's this feeling that the negativity in this space is unique to this space, like our corruption is this unique phenomenon, or like our inability to do something, or the fact that we are struggling with something, or the fact that this or that. And there is just this inability for people to understand it in a broader way, to give perspective, which would allow them to then effect change about it. And so it's the OOG. And OOG is something which people would use pejoratively to say Guam sucks, or they would use to say that this is a hateful thing and just not engage with it. But in truth, you have to think about it. Where does this idea come from? Because it gets deployed by Chamorros and non-Chamorros. It gets deployed by everybody. And it keeps people who are talking about the problems on the island from doing anything about the problems on the island.
Mm,
And so
yeah,
I found in the way that you brought out some of your media analysis, for example, some of those some interesting things there. And so when you brought up Kathy Sablan Galtai, um, I remember there was some sections on that about how the media on Guam, it's one of the struggles was that every few years people from the States come in, or every few and then it's like the island gets rediscovered, but then the same thing is on off island. Guam gets rediscovered by a new generation of journalists, and so it's kind of like, how are you supposed to, what are you supposed to do with that?
yeah, yeah. It's you remember it's always the same story with the new journalists, the new Howleys in particular, who come in and oh, there is a typhoon coming, and people in Guam is, yeah, of course. but they're like, oh, this is because it's the first time for them, but it's not the first time for anyone on in Guam. So it's so funny. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes. Now, you've already started to talk about Angel Santos, and so I actually wanted there's a few things that I want to talk about, but let's actually talk about Angel Santos because we were also mentioning Juan Benavente, and so he was at the Guam Museum recently where he was sharing photos from the protests in the 90s and the activism of Nasion Chamoru in the 90s. And so, I think Angel Santos is somebody, si Anghet is somebody who it has become a local hero. But, I'm always somebody who thinks that, heroes don't have to be perfect and heroes don't have to be anything this or that, and so what was your experience? And so, I think that the more that we know about Anghet and the struggle and so on, the
yeah,
stronger it is, the more durable it is, the more durable a figure him and Nashon Chamorro are, as opposed to just thinking of them as empty vessels for pride or empty vessels for like cultural, power, because then they can easily be sort of disrupted. And so, I wanted to, because for example, you had mentioned to me that, Ang had talked to you even about repatriation of artifacts, and you were there when he was also making the transition to political office, something which, a lot of people don't, some people only think of him today as being a senator. They don't remember him as being a grassroots activist. And so can you share now your impressions, your overall
yeah.
impressions of Anghet?
Sorry. Yes, he. Uh, what of course everyone who met him will tell you is that he had the charisma that you would expect from a leader like him, and he definitely had the charisma. Um, he he was he was driven very much by his personal experiences, both as a veteran, but also as the father of a child that had died as a toddler, and he had the tattoo of across his heart, uh, uh, commemorating his daughter. Uh, but then also I think he was um, there was there was a kind of rage beneath the surface, and uh, it was to me it was very noticeable that this rage uh, it was fueled by his or it rather it fueled his activism, but it was also very personal because I think because of his child, but also because of the resistance he met and the marginalization that he experienced. So I remember, for instance, this is one of those episodes. Um, we were going from I think it was a pocket meeting, um, and we were driving in his car. I was seated next to him in the passenger seat. C1 was in the back, and his girlfriend was also in the back. Um, and this was the night was dark. It was late, and suddenly he just went like crazy. I don't remember how fast he went, but he just floored the car, and we flew through the night. And this is one of those instances when you saw that there was a there was a little bit of this rage that was allowed to come out in that form, that he was um, uh, but other than that, we also, I mean, I think it was maybe even that night, or maybe some at some other point, he took me to uh, a group of Tsumoru who had uh, um, occupied. I don't know. That's not the wrong word. That's the wrong word. But who had settled on a piece of land next to the to a big road because that it was their uh, traditional their land, but
Oh yes.
had
Was
been
it
sold.
they squatting on land that had
Squatting on that
belonged
on the
to their
yeah,
like parents or grandparents, and then the military had
exactly,
taken it after the war?
exactly, yes, exactly. And so we went there, and I I was a bit scared because there were guns, and a dead pig was hanging from a tree. So I figured myself, oh, that could be me. Identified with the pig. But anyway, maybe it's being a howley, but being that kind of same color. Uh, anyway, so um, nobody wanted me to see their situation, and so we stayed there for a bit and talked. What else? But then there was also one meeting where some of his they were not Nasion Chamoru, but it's like hanging around Nasion Chamoru, and three of the guys uh, began shouting at me and calling me a spy and all that, and they were on their way to beat me up when Xianget intervened, and he said something that I thought was so brilliant. He said that, "Do you really think if they want to spy on us, they would send this conspicuous white guy from Sweden who stands out like a sore thumb? I mean, they probably have." He said, "It's probably one of you guys." Isn't
That
it
is
brilliant?
yeah, no, that is a
Yeah, so it completely diffused the situation. Yeah. And uh, yeah, and as you said, I mean, I think the last time we spoke was uh, when I was about to leave, and I wanted to say goodbye. And he said, "Well, how do you travel back?" And I told him that, yeah, we're going to go through Hawaii. And he said, well, tell the Bishop Museum to give us our Samodo items back. And I think he was half joking, but I thought, yeah, sure, because repatriation was a big on the agenda right then. And so I actually went to the Bishop Museum. They panicked when I told them why I was there. And the director actually came down to talk to me and calm me down. I mean, I wasn't upset or anything. I was just saying that. And I said I had looked around and I had seen that there's basically, I know that the Hornbostels, the German couple that collected items from the Marianas, that they had given you a lot of stuff from the Mariana Islands. So where are they? They said, well, they're in storage. And I said, well, then in that case, you can send them back, because they can be displayed in Guam. I don't know what happened after that, but at least I felt that I did good on my promise to Angit. And I also met in Honolulu Laura Thompson, who was 93 at the time, who had been the first one to write an ethnography at Samoru ethnography. Now, her situation compared to mine as a field worker was, of course, completely different. She was there on behalf of the military, the Navy, and uh, she was provided with a car, a chauffeur, a driver, uh, a cook, a couple that cooked for her and cleaned for her and everything. So this was a slightly different situation. Let's put it that way. And then so when we talked, now I don't want I don't want to shade her as the young people say, but and also she was getting on, but when I told her that yeah, there's an independence movement in Guam, she was stunned. She said, "What? These people think they can rule themselves?"
Ooh.
Yeah,
It, I mean, it doesn't surprise it doesn't surprise in some ways. I mean, Laura Thompson was somebody who definitely was supportive of the Chamorro people in other ways, but that does not
in
mean
other
then
ways,
that
yes.
you are supportive of them in the sense of self-determination and decolonization. Like you know, people may love their pets and their petri dishes, and stuff like that. But that is so interesting, because Laura Thompson, in advocating for more rights within the U.S. context, citizenship for Chamorros, then she wasn't allowed to return to Guam.
No.
Could not continue her research, but it would make sense then because, so many of something similar happened with, Carlton Skinner, who was the first civilian governor of Guam, where when he would come back, and every time he would come back to Guam, there would be increasing interest in decolonization. And it was just not something that he could fathom. But the thing, though, is look out your window. The world has fathomed it. Why wouldn't the Chamorro people who are unincorporated, foreign in a domestic sense, why wouldn't they look at what has happened in Micronesia, in the Pacific? Why wouldn't they look and see that we are right next door to all these independent countries in Asia? Why not? It's a possibility, and you don't have to be afraid of it. It's a possibility. And so, but thank you for sharing that. That's a fascinating sort of uh little tidbit, adds to my knowledge of Laura Thompson.
Yeah. No, I mean it was a very solid and good study she did conducted. Um, but I think it's very difficult if you have your ethnographic people that you study, and there's a probably in your own cognitive apparatus there's a category for them. These are the brown people I studied, and then to somehow recategorize them as political, uh, actors and agents of their own fate. That I think is you have to recategorize, and that might have been difficult. Maybe I don't know.
Oh, wow. No, fascinating, fascinating. Now, I want to you were there as well for when Angel Santos, or when Angel was elected, when he won, when you said that the votes were counted and so on. And so, this was and um you shared with me, for example, and you've donated to the museum video of your time in Guam, including a celebration for Senator-elect Angel Santos. And so can you talk about kind of what it was like? And I think one of the things to for those watching to keep in mind is that, Angel Santos was an incredibly controversial figure. To give people a sense of this, in 1999, when I was a student at the University of Guam, like one of the pranks that people would would play, or actually in 98, when I first came back, that's right, there was the election in 98. When I first came back to Guam and I started at UOG, one of the pranks that people would play is that they would get Angel Santos's, when he ran for governor, they would get his stickers and then they would put it on people's cars. And then basically, because while there was those who loved Angel Santos and believed in him, there was also those who loathed him, who thought of him as being racist, anti-American, a malcontent. And so I remember when I was working at the field house at the University of Guam as a work study, and one of the staff there, who was African American but had lived on Guam for a number of years, he was so angry because some student had put an Angel Santos sticker on his car, and he came in and he cursed out everybody, wanting to know who had put this sticker on his car, and how dare somebody put this, and he called Angel Santos all these horrible things. And I was so like I didn't know much. I didn't know anything about Angel Santos at that time. I was just like 18 years old, and not very critical. But and so in even in earlier than that, in 93 and 94, this was after protests, jumping the fence at Tidzan. This was blocking access to Potts Junction, squatting on land. They even had um I remember seeing pictures of the protests where they went down into Tumon, and members of the Chamorro Chetlus for Independence had signs in Japanese talking about Japanese war atrocities and how they should apologize to the Chamorro people, written in Japanese. And
Mm.
so you know, they were they were angry, they were in your face for that time. And so the idea then that Angel Santos would win as a senator was huge. And so can you I'll put some of the video here in the background. Who's that show? And so I'll have it playing while you talk, but can you kind of talk about like what was the feeling like? Because you were around a lot of Nasion Chamoru members. You were kind of in conversations at that time, and so what was it like? Here he is outside the legislature.
Michael Phillips, yeah. Uh, yes. So the thing is that coming from a European perspective, where to this is a very important topic. The the one thing that I found very interesting, but also a bit unsettling, was that all of the local politics and well, politics in general in Guam are framed in a U.S. American um, institutional setup, and what then becomes a very prominent item and topic of controversy is ethnicity, is identity, and this is where the controversy around Angel as young was the most intense. Now, also that's why they called him a racist, because obviously he tended to exclude other residents of Guam at the time, at least rhetorically. Now, in coming from a European perspective, I noticed something that people did not talk about really, and that is a class issue, an issue of social class. So Agnet was obviously from the wrong social class. You see, he was not from one of the prominent families, the ones that are entitled to political offices for generations. So he's this he's just not US educated. He's not he doesn't fit the mold of who you're supposed to be in terms of social class to be a senator. Um, so all kinds of things were thrown his way, but I think there was a sorry a sort of classism that was at the bottom of all this. He was just from the wrong social background, not worthy of the political office. So it was not just his activism, but just this fact that he was not from the right background. And I mean, this is one of the things that always struck me, that there's even in terms of Chamorro identity, there is you have to overlook that there is quite a big difference between, let's say, somebody called Calvo and somebody called Santos. You know, there's this difference is very it structures pretty much everything in political life and even in social life. And I remember I was obviously not all last names that are associated with privilege and wealth automatically, actually, I mean, that people who have those family names are actually connected to privilege and wealth, because it depends on what familian you actually belong to. But still, there is a class division in as there is everywhere. I mean, this is not something unique to Guam. It's not unique to the Chamorro people. It's everywhere. But that's an important aspect, and this was, to me, also one of the explanations why Agnet he could get votes from many non-Chamorro people, from Filipinos, because he was seen as the champion of the downtrodden, of the disadvantaged, of the underprivileged. You see?
No, thank you. That's one of the sort of in Pacific Passages, you know, the way that you brought class into it was, you know, when I was a graduate student, it was very helpful because, you know, and I believe you do talk about it in your book, but in most histories of Guam, it's kind of smoothed over. It's kind of not an issue. And then even, you know, when we look at the issue of, you know, one of the things that's always fascinated me is the history of unions, or the lack of history of unions in Guam, and people. So for Chamorros in our diaspora who then come home, for where the progressive conversation, the democratic sort of minded conversation in the States tends to have a stronger union workers organizing emphasis. But then you come to Guam and that conversation is almost non-existent. Sort of the workers emphasis, the class emphasis is sort of non-existent. And then different activists, you know, especially those that come and they have that question, well, how come this has never really come out? And I said, well, it actually has. There was the Guam Federation of Teachers strike in the
Yeah.
1980s, but one of the things that killed it is that it was a sort of a union kind of striking, but it became a racial issue too. Predominantly white
Mm.
teachers who
Yeah.
then with a striking against a perceived Chamorro government, then
Yeah.
largely replaced the teachers with Filipino contract teachers.
Yeah.
And so it's like a and so but that's one thing that I really liked about Pacific Passages is that it's a reminder that even if somebody hasn't talked about an issue before, or even if you're used to thinking about these issues only on a larger scale. So you think, oh, well, Marx didn't talk about Guam, so you can't talk about class in Guam. Or, oh, we can't talk about these class issues because Guam's too small, which is a common sort of thing that if a community is so small, people don't see these things that way. Simply, that's simply not true. And so that's one thing that I
Mm.
appreciated about Pacific Passages is that it's just a reminder that these things are always there, but there may be narratives in the community which might cover them up, might kind of denaturalize them, make it so that it doesn't seem like they're there. Like we're
Mm.
we're just we're all one community. We're all just
Oh,
one
yeah.
island and stuff like
Mm.
that. And but who benefit
Yeah.
from that sort of thing? Well,
Exactly.
tends to
Yeah.
be those that have more land and more businesses than the
Yeah.
others. Now we're
I mean,
oh my oh my goodness,
the the
go ahead, go ahead.
the Bank of Guam Longuereros, um, I mean, they were quite open to Angel. But one thing that I thought I could somehow circumventing the traditional families, privileged families, I uh, I arranged a meeting between the then head of the uh, or director, I guess, of the Hilton, and not only the Hilton in Guam, but the Hilton in the Pacific and even Hong Kong and stuff. His name was Manfred Pieper. He was German, so I had access to him. And I arranged a meeting between him and Angel, which was very interesting because, of course, champion of the working people. Um, when we were served lunch, he invited the waitress, come and sit with us and have lunch together with us, which of course Manfred Pieper was 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 not having it. But um, anyway, but it was a very interesting meeting because I wanted to get him to get him into contact with the Chamber of Commerce and to have direct access to that part of the economy, the tourism industry, unfiltered, and not through other channels, but rather have a direct channel with, and that worked out quite well, I think.
Oh, wow. This is now I do need to apologize because we have so much more that I had wanted to talk about and we are almost out of time.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah,
so I wanted to see, would you be okay coming back in 2026 to talk about some of the other topics in Pacific Passages?
sure, of course.
Biba.
I'll
Oh.
I'll be in Amman in Jordan, and
And
yeah,
so that's Sidus Masi, because there's the issue of yes, the issue there's a few other issues, the cultural politics, militarization, but I'm glad that this one focused on kind of Nasion Chamoru and protests and stuff like that. And even that we got in class, because somebody asked me recently, because one of the things they always used to say that what is it? yeah, that when trends happen in the United States a few years later, 10 years later, they happen in Guam or something like that. And so does social media does this change things? Does it happen sooner rather than later? And so when we look at where America is heading now, sort of with
Mm.
the right, the conservative swing and so on, one of my friends was asking me um, like what do we do in terms of pushing back against if kind of there is this powerful swing of conservatism, this conservative power grab, and this cultural push. And then Guam gets wrapped up in that because in the United States, Charlie Kirk was killed, and then it led to all of this silencing and censoring. And here on Guam, we saw a number of people embracing sort of those types of talking points. And there was this question of like, well, what do you do about it? And I was like, well, we can look to kind of what has happened in the past, but we also have to remember that some of the answers may go against kind of the conventional island wisdom. And so one of those is that what we were just talking about is, that it's if we think of ourselves as just one simple island. How do you create a leftist surge to push back against sort of that the rightist inertia from the States? Well, you can do something and class can be a focus like that. But it does mean then that you have to have that populist, economically focused message like that, which means then that you can't you not all Chamorro names are made the same, or not all island families are made the same, and some island families have more than other island families, and so it was talking, and Pacific Passages was one of the first books focusing on Guam, where it really kind of put it in those types of frames, because other books about Guam history for me had talked about, oh, there's the Hagåtña families, and there's the Spanish descended families and so on, but it had never then connected it to theoretical frameworks for what that means for society, what it means then in a way for understanding how things have evolved, or what you can do about it then. And so that was one of the things then in it you bringing up Angel Santos there. It definitely was one of the pulls, one of the ways, as you mentioned, that he was able to overcome the controversy, the accusations of racism, anti-Americanism, is by having that idea that for the little man, for the little person, for the underdog, coming from humble roots and so on. And so that's one of the reasons why knowing Nasion Chamoru, knowing Angel Santos, and knowing that history, as opposed to simply just kind of the symbol, it's important for those in Guam today who are looking for answers or looking for ideas about where we go next. Well, what did Angel Santos really do? What did Nasion Chamorro really do? It wasn't just they jumped a fence and then the military base closed, and so what was it? And there's and so I wanted to give you a chance now, just to share any kind of closing thoughts that you might have, because there's one quote there's a number of quotes that you have in Pacific Passages that I always return to over the years in scholarly work or in other work. And one of them talked about kind of Nasion Chamorro and other sort of decolonization focused activism, and how it elevated the conversation, at least in political partisan campaign election terms, to where political candidates almost always advocate for a higher status than status quo, some sort of autonomy or something like that. And that was true then. It is even more true today. And the roots of that come about with the activism in the late 70s and the 80s of OPIR, and then the activism in the 90s from Nasion Chamoru for sure. But that for me, that's one of the things that what you said there is one of the things that people don't realize is one of actually the lasting impacts of Nasion Chamoru is that it actually reshaped the conversation to where more and more people saw the political status as open, as something like independence possible, as something better than status quo. And politicians, one of the first people to then move into Guam deserves more. Guam deserves more. And even it was just right before the pandemic where the majority of candidates in a survey for senator said that they would prefer independence as as a status option. Now, whether they strongly believe in it or whether they're just going with the political winds at the time and wanting to make a statement about love of island and love of culture or pride and so on. But it speaks to what you were saying that this is one of those impacts that there was lots of things that Nasion Chamoru hoped to do and hoped to accomplish. And one of them is that it did change the contours of the conversation around political status. And so, do you have any thoughts, any kind of reflections that you want to share then looking back on your time? Because you spent a lot of time, and you got an inside view of Nasion Chamoru compared to a lot of people. A lot of people never got to kind of spend that much time with people like Angel Santos and others. And so your final reflections kind of on their impact on your time with them at a very important time in Guam's history.
Yeah, the as you say, the impact was strong, and it was, as you also has pointed out many times, is that there was so much controversy around Nasion Samoa and Sianget. Um, the I think, as you rightly put it, the frame of reference has to change, and if you're these are steps, and they're historical steps. So I mean, if you go back in time and you look at the 1950s and you look at Ricky Bodadzu, and you see, you know, let's start with giving people citizenship, recognizing them as full citizens. Um, yeah, that's one step. Now, of course, if you want independence, then citizenship is not really a pathway to independence, but it gave voice, and it gave a kind of assurance that we can be agents, not just passive subjects. And in that sense, I think the path to independence will be in steps. It's very unlikely that the US will give up control of Guam for strategic reasons. Yeah, primarily. There's really and not many other things that they can be interested in. I mean, there's no Guam doesn't have diamonds and gold or oil. I don't know, maybe if you're digging deep enough, but uh, so I think that there needs to be this kind of pragmatic approach that we will get to independence, but we may not see it in our lifetime, but we will still keep this project alive. So to see it as something that will take time. So patience is, I think, the first virtue here, which does not equal passivity or just waiting for things to happen. And that I think was the contribution of OPIR and of Nasion Chamoru was to show people that you can actually be proactive. You don't have to wait for the master to decide something over your head, but you can actively engage in this issue. And that's I think that needs to be kept alive. And I'm glad I also saw this, that there is much more openness to these ideas of changing the political status. And I mean, this was not even thought possible 30 years ago. Now, at least there is, the change of mindset that, we this, it is a possibility. And I think that is very promising.
Yes, no, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that reflection. I like that patience is not passivity, sort of that having the long view and the long plan of things. And then, but yes, and not judging sort of the actions of those who have gone before, because in the context in which they made those choices, right? And that Robert Underwood often talks about that, that citizenship at that time made a lot of sense.
Mm,
Of course, but then sort of what is the next step? What is the
yeah.
next step after that? And so you can't see that far into the future. And so you have to kind of do the best that you can given the situation that you face. And so, yeah, this conversation has been very, very enriching for me. Um, Filling in some of my knowledge because I was in the 90s in the heyday of Nasion Chamoru. I was a young child. I was like a middle school and high school kid, so I didn't know much about this. And so coming back then to it and then hearing these stories, um, because by the time that I knew Angel Santos, for example, he was already a senator, and he was already sick, and by that time, and so I never got to have a long conversation with Angel Santos. I did with I got to have many conversations with other members of Nasion Chamorro, but I didn't get to, and so finding, so you giving insight into sort of Nasion Chamorro in sort of the one of the busiest times when is important. And so si Zeus Masi, who agradece how, si Zeus Masi perifanatomo. And I want to definitely bring you back in a couple of months in 2026 because for those of you who have not read Pacific Passages and and especially the chapter with the Chamorro Language Commission talking about changing the spelling of Chamorro, it is like when you are young, and you sneak to listen to the old people when they're chatting and when they're talking all the family business and drama and fighting and arguing. It is like that because you get to see all of these people many of whom have passed on now,
Mm.
senators, esteemed scholars. You get to hear them, you get to see them argue and debate this issue. And so it would be good then to get kind of your perspective as somebody, an outsider who was there, listening and kind of navigating the cultural politics too. And so I would love to have you back uh, in a couple months, sometime in 2026.
It would. I think what we could do is also to. I will send you a link to the book Pacific Passages that is freely available as PDF now. And so we can post it somewhere so everybody can just download the book.
Oh, oh yes, definitely. Oh
Yeah,
no, no, thank you. Thank you so much, Senor Sidus Masi. This has been wonderful and enriching. If you have not read yet Pacific Passages, um, it is a very interesting book, and then I will put a link to sort of the PDF where people can download it. But si dus masi tatlo senyor nai, pwede mo Pago, thank you for joining for this episode.
Juice Mase, and thank you for having me. Thank you.
Dora, we will continue the conversation. You will be back. And para hamzo ni umeegad zan umeekungok, ifanakpo esti episode fanatsu. Adios. Esta ki manatli hitatlu. Adios.
Adios.